I'm Suzuki, and today I'm going to be teaching you a basic flute vibrato exercise in 7 levels. Now this exercise is great whether you're learning vibrato for the first time or whether you want to gain a little more flexibility and variety in the vibrato that you already have. Personally, I have been practicing it for years and find it very useful as a teaching tool for my younger students as well as my advanced students. Now, before we get to the exercise, let's talk for a minute about why we vibrate. For me, there are 2 main reasons. And the first, of course, is expression. Vibrato, when added well to a sound, is really lovely. It's very beautiful. It adds so much depth to the sound and to the music. Number 2 is projection. Vibrato, when used well, can also help us to project our sound further into space and into the hall that we're playing in. So this exercise I find very useful for working on those 2 aspects of vibrato, which I can then apply to the rest of my playing. This exercise is based on a famous melody by the great French flutist Marcel Moyse, and this is from his book, Petite Étude Mélodique. This is number 1 from that book. If you don't have access to this book or to this music, I would say that you could still give this exercise a try. I would just pick a very, very simple melody. As you'll see as we go along, the Moyse melody is all half notes and quarter notes and doesn't move any quicker than a quarter note. The reason that this is great for this particular exercise is that we're going to be doing something called metered vibrato, meaning that we choose the number of pulses of vibrato per beat and gradually increase those. As you'll see, we end up putting some asymmetrical number of pulses on each beat. So if it doesn't move quicker than a quarter note, that's probably going to be okay for this exercise. Also, I would highly recommend setting a metronome, especially if you're new to metered vibrato practice. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to have a metronome going while I play, but know that I am constantly checking in on my metronome and am shooting for around 60 beats per minute. Level 1, no vibrato. Now, you may have tuned into this video to say, I'm here to learn vibrato. Why do I need to practice without vibrato? Well, I would say that a non-vibrato practice is very important, even for those of us who have been vibrating for years. The reason is that, number 1, we want to make sure that we know all the notes right before we proceed. Number 2, we also want to check in with our sound production on that day. Make sure that our airspeed, our direction, our intonation, all of those aspects are as close to what we want as possible. Because when we add vibrato, that's going to be adding another variable, and we want to make sure that our bases, our foundation, are very solid. So, first, start off with no vibrato. Level 2, 8th notes. In this level, we're going to be taking our bass sound and slowly start to add pulses of vibrato to that sound so that we can begin to understand the physicality of how vibrato happens in our body. And now on that note, I will say that there is a lot of information out there about how to create vibrato, where in the body it comes from, what you're supposed to engage and when, and that can be very overwhelming. I'm not going to say that I have a master solution to that. However, what I will say is that a lot about vibrato and flute playing in general is a little bit mystical, maybe. Unlike a stringed instrument, for example, where they can see their hands and their wrists and their bow, the way we create sound, the shapes inside of our mouth, the way we engage our bodies on the inside, is all invisible to us. We can only feel and sense what's going on in here and in here, and try our best to relate those physical sensations to the product that we hear coming back at us from the instrument. So I'm going to challenge you to not overthink it too much, but to pay close attention to the signals that your body is sending you. And when you like the sound of what you're doing, pay very close attention to the way your body feels and the way that the instrument is responding to the way your body feels. Try to remember that and try to come back to that and build on that. So now I'm going to ask you to pick a very comfortable note and do a little experiment with me. We're going to start by visualizing our sound in 3 dimensions. So not just living in the plane of your face, but being able to move away from you and come back, and away from you and come back again. I'm going to pick a B. It's this visualization of the sound moving out and coming back, moving out and coming back, pushing it out with the speed of my air and the compression of air, and then allowing it to fall back towards me. That creates the pulses of vibrato. Now, when I'm pulsing, I'm also very conscious of the direction that my air is going in, and specifically aiming for this opposite side of the embouchure hole, the back of the riser, and making sure that my air at every point of the pulse has connection with that riser. Now, if I don't do that, something like this can happen. As you see, the vibrato becomes very choppy and disjoint, rather than connected and fluid. Level 3, triplets. In this level, similar to level 2, we're still trying to figure out the physicality of how to create these pulses of vibrato. And I think it's very important to say at this point that some of these slower speeds are not meant to be concert ready. It's not even necessarily meant to be beautiful. We're trying to teach our bodies to do something that they don't naturally want to do, which is to create these pulses of air, and to train the muscles and the mind to be able to control the regularity and the depth of these pulses. Level 4, 16th notes. So if you feel like your pulses are getting a little narrower or a little bit closer as you speed up, that's okay, don't worry about it. As long as you're able to control the speed still, and also to be able to do that in a relaxed and healthy way without forcing, that's all that matters. So you're on the right track, keep going. Level 5, quintuplets. Now for me, this is where it actually starts to sound like vibrato. Probably because we're getting a little bit closer to what most people would call an average or normal vibrato speed. Additionally, what I like about this quintuplet practice, and especially for some of my younger students, is that it really forces you to learn quintuplet subdivision, which is not super easy for everyone. My one tip for you is university. Now, I use university as a 5-syllable word that I can say over and over again. University, 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 university. If you have trouble wrapping your mind around that, and especially while playing, then you know what? You might just want to walk around saying university, 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 university over and over again. Maybe do that in private. But after a while you kind of get into a groove. And it's the same thing with the vibrato. It's going to feel very awkward to divide that beat into 5 with the vibrato at first. But the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. And it will help you in many other aspects of music, rhythm-wise. Level 6, sextuplets. So as your pulses get quicker and quicker, keep in mind that the depth of the pulse is going to have to start to get a little more shallow in order to facilitate that quicker action. Now, if at first this is difficult for you and you can't get it up to the same speed that you were doing all the other levels, that's okay. It's totally okay to lower the metronome click a few notches to somewhere that's a little more comfortable, and then work up the speed in the same way that you would work up a very technical etude from a slower speed. In this way, you'll eventually be able to achieve a quicker speed in a way that is still comfortable for you to play. Level 7, sextuplets with dynamics. Now, you might have noticed until now that I haven't mentioned anything about dynamics, and that was on purpose. In some of the slower speeds, the main purpose is not necessarily to be musical. It's to work on the physicality and the action of the vibrato so that we get very comfortable and gain a certain amount of control over the action. Now, with sixes is when I like to start thinking about the musical aspect. Looking at the music, it's a very simple structure, okay? Crescendo one bar, decrescendo another bar. How does vibrato relate to that? Well, as we talked about before, the depth and distance that the vibrato pulse is traveling can affect a lot of your projection. So for sixes, and thinking about crescendo, decrescendo, I like to think of a terrace pulse, that each one of these 6 pulses in a beat is climbing a little bit higher or traveling a little bit further away to the peak of the crescendo and then gradually coming back or terracing down. This type of practice can be very useful when you're thinking about, real music. That's not an exercise. When we're trying to plan crescendo, decrescendo, not only think about it in our head, but think about physically how we do it. How it happens in the body, how we choose one note, a specific note, and build the sound to that one note, and then gradually come away. Now, this exercise is a great way to practice that technique that will hopefully help all the other types of music that you play. Bonus level, 7s and higher. For most people, and especially for beginners, I think sextuplets at 60 is a great goal. However, for more advanced players, I would recommend going into 7s and even 8s per beat. For me, I'll say that 8 is purely aspirational. It sounds terrible, but I still practice it. Just like the other levels, even if it doesn't sound great, practicing it does help to train your muscles in a certain way and can apply well to other parts of your playing. Free vibrato. Now, after you've done all this work, counting all the pulses very carefully on every beat, I always recommend taking one free pass through the melody. and trying to not count. And sometimes that can be hard too. But I think it's very important because in real life and in music, real music, most of us don't have the time to be counting pulses, and it's not necessarily the best artistic decision. So it's nice to try and get that one very free, creative pass through the melody. Now, I would recommend that you try to vary the speeds. In previous exercises, we had just been staying in one speed for the whole level. Now, I would recommend switching it up a little bit. If you want a more intense sound, maybe the vibrato wants to become a little bit quicker. If you're making a very fine diminuendo, the same way a violinist would, maybe you also don't want it to be too slow. Maybe you want it to be a little shallower. If you're making a big crescendo, maybe you might want to play around with the depth a little bit, the distance, the breadth of the pulse, and see how that affects your sound and how it affects the way that you hear the music coming out of your instrument. And in this way, you can really incorporate the lessons that you learned from this exercise and try to apply them to many, many other pieces of music that you play. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and maybe learned something today. If you have, or if you have any questions for me about this exercise or about vibrato in general, please feel free to leave me a comment. Thanks so much for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.